Ben.
Brandon Jones.
You reviewed that Fallout 4 there.
Boy, did I.
That was a big game.
Yeah.
And you wrote a big review. But sometimes, even when we write big reviews, there's still not enough space. You gave your big review to me, and I, trimmed it down as much as I could.
Yeah.
But you have more to tell me about Fallout, about your process of reviewing Fallout, and just how you feel about Fallout 4.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you're reviewing, you have a job to give an accurate representation of the game, but you don't always have room to say where you're coming from as much as you want to, and that was something I want to do. I have very strong feelings about Fallout 4.
Where are you coming from, Ben?
Yeah, Fallout 4 is one of those games where there was not a final score on it until very late last night. I was at home.
I believe it was 3 question marks I received in the initial draft.
Yeah, and those question marks stayed there for a very long time because I had so many strong feelings that went both ways. And Fallout 4 is one of those games that when we got it, I just didn't stop playing. I've put so much time into that game. I've seen so much of it. And there are things about that game that are super depressing, and we might as well start there. If you read reviews on any Bethesda game, they sound very similar. They're glowing, but there's always like this big caveat where it's like, and this game barely functions, or it crashed on us a bunch of times, or the AI is completely all over the place.
I saw someone on social media that was like, we had these glitches in Bethesda games for so long, I kind of like them now. And it was like,
Right.
No, we can never say
Yeah,
that. It's the opposite of what review should be.
And I have always kind of agreed with that perspective, especially, like, I remember when I first played Oblivion, and you were kind of telling me, man, our friends would get together and just like laugh at how Oblivion would break, or the spots where it looked really awesome.
Just how human interaction in that game was very stilted,
Yeah, but at a time in my life when I played Oblivion, I honestly hadn't experienced a game that felt like that before, where I would run into these random occurrences that would just totally captivate me, and I felt like I was being rewarded for just kind of going off in a random direction. And I also felt that way about Fallout 3, and I also felt that way about Skyrim. Like, I am absolutely a fan of all 3 of those games, but as I was playing Fallout 4, there was this really deep-rooted and depressing sense of deja vu where I'm like, this studio has been making these games forever, and it's the same problems. Like, there were times where I would run into a character and I'd be like, really? Like, that's what you look like? Like, that's where we...
Even in the trailer,
Yeah.
dude. Even in the trailer, they were showing some characters, like, at their best moments. And I was like, it feels like you're kind of talking around me and not really, like, looking right at me and communicating, which some games do better than others. And admittedly, yeah, it is one thing where you have to look, take a step back and look at the company and realize, like, is this a priority for them?
Right.
Is this something where they're like, it's either not a strength or not something that we see a lot of return on our investment of actually, like, putting more stuff into this game? We would much rather put 20 more awesome quests in the game than spend the time to make this one person look like a Nathan Drake or a Commander Shepard or so, like a character you would actually identify with, and feel for.
Right, absolutely. It's just, I don't want to make excuses for them. There are plenty of developers out there that can make enormous worlds and have them not feel like they're barely being held together in the way that Bethesda games do, and that was something that I wanted to get across the review, and the wording is very harsh, where I say these problems are inexcusable. Like, this, we can't ignore them. We can't just turn a blind eye because there are other elements of this game that we like so much. But then when it comes to how I feel about it and what I ultimately decided to score Fallout 4, I settled on a 9, and a 9 to me is a very high score, and I'm saying you should go out, you should buy this game, and you should play it. And that's because, like, as I was reviewing Fallout 4, I said to myself, there hasn't been... I think Fallout 4 is my favorite game that I've played this year. And the games that always speak to me are the ones where I'm surprised, like constantly. Like there are things that happen in the first hour that shock me and blow me away, but then there are also things at the 70th hour where I go and I put the controller down, and my poor girlfriend was part of this process. She'd be like, let's go out to dinner. You've been playing this game all day. You haven't eaten anything. And
Thank goodness, Ben.
I would get there with her, and I would just sit there and talk about individual stories that I ran into. And I would go on for hours and hours and hours. And I think what I wanted to say on this video is you might play Fallout 4 and you might disagree with me. You might say, hey, these problems are really bad, this is inexcusable, but there was nothing that I've played this year that had a more interesting, detailed, and constantly captivating world.
Let me throw this out there, and I don't want to speak on behalf of like how your review process works, but for
Right.
me, there's always been two big classifications that factor into me scoring a game. There's one is the boring part of it, the notes. You know, I just reviewed Black Ops 3. You know, there's zombies, there's multiplayer, there's a campaign, there's the Nightmares mode after that. There's, you know, the fact that you can be a woman now. You know, there's like all sorts of elements. Like I gotta make sure to check those off and mention them because, you know, it's worth mentioning. And like you got it. The tough part is kind of trimming the fat near the bottom. I didn't talk about weapon mods in, you know, Black Ops 3. It wasn't really
Right.
necessary. Like didn't really contribute to the score that much. And then there's like how I felt. And I always find that like whether you take notes before or after while you're playing the game, those are totally separate. But like every time you actually finish a game and you realize like I'm done, like there's nothing really that I can experience with this game that's gonna like I might get more music for the video edit, but like I'm not gonna play this game anymore to actually contribute to the score. And you're just kind of left with the feeling. And I think what you're talking about with Fallout is those two things clashing. You know,
Right.
you wrote everything down on paper and you're looking at all of these issues. You're reminding yourself of all of these problems that you had with the game, but that's just clashing with this obsession that you have, this feeling that you can't shake, which is I want to go back. So how bad can those problems really be if I really want to go back in? Whereas
Right.
you'll have a game that, you know, you look at it on paper, it has all of these amazing things, but like I'm done. I just don't feel like playing it anymore. You know, it's still great, but it looks great, you know, and it checks all the boxes, like I said, but it just doesn't make me that excited. The fun
Right.
factor, the old GamePro fun factor.
Absolutely, and that's why scoring is such a vague, frustrating thing, because I feel like every year I ask myself the question, what do I care about in video games? And that answer is always changing. Because if there's so many games, and I play a lot of RPGs, where they just check the boxes. It's like, yep, okay, there's a lot of things here, you have a lot of freedom, you can do a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't, there's not a moment where I'm smiling or I want to tell somebody about it. And like in Fallout 4, there are hundreds of super mutants. They're all over the place. I killed one, and I just picked up a note on its body that just said, kill, loot, repeat. And it just sort of gave you a sense of how these creatures think and their general attitude. I didn't encounter any other notes like that on any of the other bodies. It was just this one random incidental body that I encountered like 30 hours in the game just had this note on it. I went into a building, and whenever I play Fallout games, I always level up my hacking. I always level up my lockpicking, because if you tell me I can't go somewhere, it drives me insane. I want to go there. I want to see everything that there is to see. And there were these terminals that I hacked into. And I was reading these emails, and I'm like, what? He's talking like a wizard and his +5 staff? What is going on? And then I went to another computer, and there was a character saying, yes, I use my poison daggers on the phantasmic shape. And then there was a third computer I ran into, and I finally pieced it together. There were these scientists that worked in this pre-war building. They were playing a D&D game, and you could have just missed this. You're like, oh, I don't want to go through the effort of hacking it again. But like finding those little tiny stories, the game takes so much delight in just making you smile and surprising you, that at the end of the day, no matter how angry I got about certain issues, like this was more important to me, and that's the side of the fence that I settled on.
That other side, that emotional side, you know, you're really approaching like how, you know, not how much value does this game have on paper, but how does this game make me feel, is why I think reviews exist. It's
Right.
why we watch this stuff. It's why I just don't want to watch you adding up everything and just being like really analytical about it and just kind of
Right.
stepping away from it, and thinking like, who am I in this equation? It really should just be about the game. It's like who you are is everything.
Right.
That's why you shouldn't just watch one review. You should watch many of them. You should go to Metacritic, see the top score and the bottom score, and read them both. And really try to figure out like where was this person coming from, and that's reviews.
Yes. There's one thing I want to end on, though, a word of caution that I think is really reflective of our sort of modern state of gaming. There were a bunch of people last week that somehow got early copies of Fallout 4 and were streaming when they weren't supposed to on a bunch of weird sites. And I saw people making impressions based on what they saw in the streams. And in a lot of, I watch streams all the time. A lot of ways I think they can be very useful. I'm glad consumers have it as a tool. But I was thinking about Fallout and I was like, if I just watched an hour of this game,
Yeah,
I don't know if it would sell me. And I want people to take that into consideration, that sometimes you really just have to kind of go with a game and dive in and give it a lot of time before you really understand everything it has to offer. And if you see a 10-minute video of glitches in Fallout 4, those probably actually exist. And I'm not saying they shouldn't influence opinion at all, or that they're invalid, or that you should wash them away. But also realize that maybe that isn't the whole story.
So yeah, if you've just seen Ben's review, it's just the beginning.
Yeah,
start there.
My review is not
And then
enough.
go and explore.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, good stuff, and it can be frustrating. But together, Ben, we can figure this out. We can work
Yeah.
through it, and we can master the review process.
Thank you for sitting down and letting me let loose these thoughts.
Thanks, Ben.